Welcome to the Leo Training Podcast with Joe DeLeo. You'll hear in-depth interviews and tips from world-class athletes, coaches, and industry-leading experts to help you train smarter and improve at what you love to do. Train smarter, get stronger, move better, race faster. Here's your host, Joe DeLeo.
We're back with episode 61 of the Leo Training Podcast. And this week's guest is Dr. Charlie Weingroff. Charlie is a doctor of physical therapy, a certified athletic trainer, and a certified strength and conditioning specialist. He's currently a physical therapist and strength and conditioning coach at Drive 495 in Manhattan, New York, and Fit for Life in Marlboro, New Jersey. He is also a member of the Nike Executive Performance Council and serves as the Physical Performance Lead and Head Strength and Conditioning Coach for the Canadian men's national basketball team. Prior to returning to his home of New Jersey, he was the Director of Physical Performance and Resiliency and Lead Physical Therapist for the United States Marine Corps Special Operations Command in Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. Charlie and I discuss a few key topics during this interview. We talk about early sports specialization, specifically how it relates to basketball, his work with the Philadelphia 76ers and the Canadian men's basketball team. And we also discuss his model of training equals rehab and what his thoughts are on each of the different DVD products that he has put out over the last several years. One final note before we roll into the interview. When Charlie and I recorded this, he was sitting outside, so you might pick up some wind at different times. And we also had one dropped call, so I had to splice together two different files. So if there's any breaks in the continuity of the conversation, that's why. So without further ado, let's roll to the brand new episode. Charlie Weingroff, welcome to the Leo Training Podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to come on to the show. I'm very pleased and happy to have you on.
All right, man. I know we had this scheduled a little bit. We finally were able to put it together. So yeah, it's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been crazy. We've both been traveling and stuff, been pretty busy. So it's great to finally sit down and have the chance to chat with you.
Yeah.
So before we get rolling into the topics, you are, very well established and well known in the health and fitness industry as well as the rehabilitation field. But for those that are not aware of who you are and your work, I would love for you to take a couple minutes and introduce yourself and talk about your work and what you're doing.
Yeah, so I always have to stumble on when we start these things where I have to talk about myself because not the most comfortable thing, but I think a lot of people know me as a physical therapist. I've been a physical therapist, I think, for in a couple months it'll be almost 20 years, and that's kind of the bread and butter. I certainly think that a lot of the opportunities that I've had and the situations that I've been able to been afforded is because I'm a physical therapist and I have those some requisite skills of that world. But a lot of other people don't even know I'm a physical therapist, and they only know me as a strength and conditioning coach or someone that focuses on fitness, and that indeed may be true as well. It certainly doesn't offend me, but I think maybe if it is true what you're saying that I'm so well known, maybe it's true because I feel very strongly about the scientific cornerstones that really make training and rehabilitation really not two different complementary strategies, but rather just one. And I imagine a lot of the things that we're going to talk about are how everything that I do bounces off that kind of a thought process. And the worlds that I work in, a lot of people will come see me because they need physical therapy. And a lot of people will come to see me, or I'll work in situations where I'm responsible for fitness and strength and conditioning. And to me, it's really all quite the same. So maybe that's a little bit of introduction to how I think. And maybe as we talk, we can find out a little bit more about the other things that if I started off talking about them, maybe people wouldn't think I was so credible.
No, that's great. I mean, that just gave me a great kind of question just based on your response there. So why do you think it's important, whether you're a strength and conditioning coach or a physical therapist, living in one of those worlds or both of them, to not separate out the two and kind of look at them as they're all in one continuum, if you will?
Golly, it's almost challenging to answer that because I don't know that I've ever not had some kind of shape of how I think. So there's never been like this ridiculous epiphany of like, oh my God, like I need to make this very big change. So it's almost very challenging to put into words. What I think is most important, the fact of the matter is that I don't even look at it like physical therapy and training. I just look at it as people that need certain things that certain people have. And maybe what is physical therapy, or if there's a particular quality that is beneath a certain standard, it has to be restored. It has to be brought back to its middle baseline, its minimum standard of what is normal for health, meaning you're not going to die if you don't have this particular quality. And maybe those are the skills that are typically associated with what a healthcare provider would do. And if there's certain things that people need and they need to improve, meaning they're already at a certain level where you're not going to die and you want to improve your performance, then maybe a lot of those skills are more traditional for fitness or strength and conditioning, nutrition, load management, etc. But quite frankly, they don't have to be that. There's plenty of non-healthcare providers that can help people get out of the hole. And there's plenty of fitness providers that can contribute, whether it's the things that they do well or maybe the things that their education did not initially deliver them. So I don't look at it like there's no such things as physical therapists and strength coaches. There's no such thing as rehab. In my mind, everybody trains because all you're really doing is finding the target points and delivering relevant strategies for specific adaptations to impose demands. And you see, I've almost danced and driven away from your question because it's just not how I think. I don't even know how to tell a therapist why it's important to train. I could explain a lot of the strategies that I use, which would then highlight the importance. But I can't just say, hey, it's important because of this, because everything is in context. To suggest that any one individual only needs skills that belong to one person or one group of people is probably pretty asinine, arrogant, and short-sighted. So there's a level of humility and in what I'm trying to describe of if someone has a hurt shoulder, fitness has an enormous part in making that shoulder feel better. And when somebody's feeling great and they want to keep pushing it, there's techniques that therapists and chiros and medical doctors have to continue the resilience development, which is a fancy way of saying you're just creating relevant adaptations for a specific goal, and everything, it all fits in. And you just dip into different buckets of different techniques. It doesn't matter who you are. It just matters if you know how to do them well. And of course, there's going to be certain techniques that certain people with certain educational backgrounds are going to get an opportunity to develop excellence in. So, of course, it's not saying that anybody should do anything. It's more of if there's a manual therapy technique, if you're not a manual therapist, you would not have had your 40 to 80 hours a week, 10 to 15 years to get really good at it. And if somehow you were able to finagle that kind of a workplace, well, then you should be the one doing it. But that's it's everything is important. I don't know how it could not be in terms of understanding. If I took everybody in the room and I'm like, all right, how many people raise their hands that consider themselves they have healthcare techniques? And then how many consider themselves as fitness techniques? And then who's got techniques in managing sleep? Who's got techniques in guiding nutrition? Who's got techniques in guiding or administering psychology techniques? And then who's got load management? Or what we commonly see as sports science. All those things are buckets that you just reach into to help make decisions and interventions for human performance. Just because someone has an injury doesn't mean all 6 of those buckets aren't going to be utilized.
Yeah, absolutely. So just making sure you're selecting the appropriate tool for the individual when they're coming to see you, given whatever their current status is and then what their end goal is.
But it's also choosing the tool that you don't have. That's the big thing. That's what people start to get fussy, because a lot of therapists don't know anything about training. A lot of trainers don't know anything about therapy. I don't know a lot about nutrition, except don't eat gluten and don't eat dairy and eat a lot of organic. What we're doing is trying to develop an evaluation process that it can be measured by all of these different types of interventions.
Excellent. So let's jump into one of our topics, and one of the ones we have down here. So I got to ask because I'm a big Philly sports fan. So in your career, you worked with the Philadelphia 76ers, and then you're also currently doing some work with the Canadian basketball team. So what have those two experiences been like, and like what was it like? I believe you were there when Allen Iverson was on the team, correct?
Yeah. He was.
So what was that like?
I don't know what kind of question. I don't know how to answer. What was it like? It was a job. I mean, I think a lot of people that are not in those worlds, they seem to think that how cool it would be. It's a job, and it certainly has perks. It certainly has drawbacks. It has learning experiences and glory. It's just a job. And again, that's easy to say when you've been in that world for a long time, and other people wouldn't even know how to approach getting an opportunity like that. So I don't mean to sound evasive. It's an interesting world in terms of what I'm very comfortable saying is that folks in performance, that world is not reserved for the best therapists and the best coaches in one way, in terms of skill level. But maybe those people that are not as talented or as educated or as motivated to be excellent at delivering skills of performance, these are people that are really, really good at other people enjoying their company, people that know how to deal with others in terms of not being a negative force. And it's a very challenging world, at least for me, to have constantly be that positive force and deliver what I thought I could do to help win basketball games. That doesn't mean it's like I was his dick and I couldn't do what I wanted to do, because that wasn't the case. But it's it's really warped in a lot of ways, and just amazing in others. And I think we should be able to say that about a lot of things, not just working in professional sports.
Sure. Is there anything that, you look back on, like when you were working with the 76ers and then earlier in your career, and then now working with Canadian basketball, like has your strategies changed in terms of the way you program for those athletes being in the sport of basketball?
I'd like to think I know more stuff. And that doesn't just mean those buckets have more stuff in them, but it also knows when to choose certain ones and how everything has a cost. Everything is based on return on investment. So there's much less absolutes. You can do whatever you want. Let's just understand the cost of our decisions. But the things that I've changed the most is just, we're talking almost 20 years since I started. I walked right out of PT school into the NBA in 1999. So it's almost 20 years. And just how you change as a person. And looking back, I can't tell you that I would have done anything differently, but the person that I am today, I would have done things differently then. And there's a pretty good chance that I would not be as talented or as a therapist. You just can't. It's not a place where great performance, rehab, etc. It's for the best players, to a degree for the best coaches. But it's not the place for the best. And I don't know that if I had made different decisions in how I conducted myself and maybe had been similar to a lot of the people that have 20 and 30, even 40-year careers in terms of how they conducted themselves, which is not something that it's like this weird thought process, because I never would want to act that way. But that's the way you're successful in that world. And that's just what I've come to learn. And it's probably why I have not gone back. I've interviewed a whole bunch of times, but it always seems to not be in the cards, which is okay. And to segue into what we do with men's Canada basketball, we don't have to worry about any of that. It's really quite remarkable how all the things that the NBA isn't, and how people are forced to conduct themselves, and the level of care and the level of training and the level of load management that's there, which is mediocre at best, is we don't have those barriers. And it's cool because I can look you in the eye and say we got the same players. I mean, we have players that are making the same $150 million, and et cetera. A lot of folks don't really know, that our guys are Canadian because they go to American high schools, they go to American colleges. So look, you're asking a question. A zebra doesn't change his stripes. I mean, I'm going to answer. I don't really feel like I'm being negative. I'm just giving you my opinion on my experience. And I know that I have more social, interactive, interpersonal leadership, blah, blah, blah skills today than I did when I was in my 20s. So it's an interesting conversation that it's very sobering, because I never thought that I would not be back in the league. I never thought I would not have a career like all these other dudes. But at the same time, if I ever go back, it's going to be a huge pay cut now. So that's an interesting thing. It's very humbling, very sobering, very disturbing. But at least I can talk about it, and it's a really warped. How about that? Right. You told me before you're from New Jersey, so we use different words in New Jersey, at least where I'm from in New Jersey. So I won't right. I won't say it, but right. It's a warped world.
Yeah. So let me ask you this: for younger athletes, junior, those in high school, would you have any good recommendations for them in terms of things they should be working on in the weight room, or things they should not be doing in terms of like maybe specific lifts that are going to hamper what they're doing on the court?
No, absolutely not. In terms of your question, specific lifts, no. You just train with good form, train with intelligent load management. All the different qualities of training. No, you don't need to do anything special. There's and the reason I'll even say that is because culturally in basketball, even when you're in high school, like, you really haven't developed a fundamental general physical preparedness level to actually begin to have a special physical preparedness focus. That being said, the special physical preparedness focus for basketball, I mean, what does a basketball player do? He goes up and down, he runs, he shuffles sideways, and he jumps and he reaches. A steady diet of Olympic lifting is going to fit a lot of those things. A steady diet of some really basic multi-directional speed, agility, quickness training, whatever word's going to float your boat. These are all things that are basketball is just a very general sport. They jump a lot. The most important thing, I think, for young basketball players would be play other sports, and including one at some period of time. You shouldn't be playing basketball, because not only can you develop certain things that are going to be useful for basketball, you're going to develop different energy systems, which can then support the alactic, aerobic nature of playing a game of basketball. But you just can't play all the time. You have to have a point in time where you can develop general skills rather than the special and specific skills. So I think that's the most important. And that's probably the case of any kind of young athlete, where you're allowed to say you're a basketball player. But I think it's just so important to be exposing yourself to other ways to develop physically other than your sport. And those things all come to roost.
Yeah, and that's great, because that's actually one of the other topics that we kind of had down was early sports specialization. So that's kind of one of your big recommendations right now, is to make sure they're playing multiple sports and really develop overall as an athlete, while they can and should focus on basketball if that's their primary sport. But could you expand a little bit more on when you said in terms of their physical level, like they're just sort of still working on their general physical preparedness because they're younger? Like how long do you think it takes to kind of really develop that foundation you're talking about?
It is, we have to, the earliest, in my opinion, based on what we think we know is, and again, we do this in Canada basketball.
All
All
right.
right, pick it up. What was the question?
So we were talking about developing that foundation for general physical preparedness as a youth basketball player, and how long it takes to kind of get that foundation established. Those types of principles.
So you probably can't get to that answer until after the second growth spurt, and even then, it's still like this very challenging thing. Now, luckily for basketball, if you stick with a general program, it's going to be fine. I think there's some other sports where it's maybe a closed loop, where, let's say if it's a sprinter, if you're doing something that doesn't equate to sprinting, then you'll probably have a major problem. But again, sprinting itself is still a very general skill. So this is a really interesting question where I personally don't believe it has an answer, and it makes it, the culture of basketball makes it really easy, because even when they get to these particular pit stops and milestones of biological and chronological age, they still haven't developed the general skills, because all they do is play basketball. There's certainly some cultural dogma to basketball, whether it's the individual culture where lifting weights isn't, or general preparedness isn't the answer, or just some unfortunate thought processes in how to develop as an athlete, where all they do is play basketball. They think getting bigger is going to somehow mess with their shot or whatever, silliness. But you probably have to run through the windows of development in terms of peak height velocity, and then you start to make that decision. And clearly, many athletes are not done growing, but we're only talking about the spurts. It doesn't. It's not like, okay, now he's 6'3" and he's slated to be 6'4". Like, that's not what we're talking about. But when they have these explosive periods of time where height is being graded, then if you can jump in with certain qualities, you can really do some really good things in terms of when they're older, and how a lot of people do it by crook, meaning they just happen to do these things in a random fashion without the scientific know-how. And I think if we actually do know, we can reverse engineer what they did, and we feel very strongly that we can create these. We can take advantage of these windows. But again, when does it happen? Usually if it's a boy, maybe as late as 15 or 16 years of age, and then if it's a girl, it's younger. It could be 12, 13, 14 years of age.
That's very interesting. So I don't know a ton about the age group, if you're like how much if you're working with junior athletes in Canada basketball, but do you have the ability?
No, we are.
Okay.
Our youngest, I think the youngest players, and I could be wrong, is in a targeted athlete system, and I'm almost embarrassed that I don't know, because there's at my level there's a lot of other people that are carrying out our strategic plans, but I think they're as young as 7 and 8 years old, where the types of things that they're doing is maybe what people your and my senior would have been doing in gym class in like the 50s and 60s, because I think those are the answers. So and then for the ones that we really have a keen investment in, then those are the ones that will start to really get on top of measuring their peak height velocities, and try to deliver training programs that focus on the qualities that their peak height velocity. So really, a lot of kids have to do different things. Kids of the same age, chronological age, might be doing something very different, etc.
Very cool. That's very interesting. Do you utilize like an HRV system with those athletes?
So at the young levels, not as much as we do at the older levels, but we have a tremendous hallmark of our program in Canada is using Omega Wave, of which HRV is one piece of that puzzle.
So one of the things I was curious about was in utilizing Omega Wave, Could you talk about some of the other things that it's measuring besides HRV, and then also has that translated into a reduction in either overall injuries or soft tissue injuries going down?
So the first thing, if you use there's an extended time to using the omega wave measurements, and those are we'll use those maybe once a year, or maybe once every month, if depending on the situation. But the three main qualities that are measuring are measurements of the cardiac system, the central nervous system, and the metabolic system. Now, keep in mind where a lot of confusion is about omega wave is that what is it really measuring? It's measuring electrical qualities. It measures electrical signals, and those electrical signals are believed through the fundamentals of what omega wave is based on to represent a compensatory function. It doesn't mean that it has nothing to do with the capacity of the individual. It means what is your body doing from previous activities, which could include anything. It's not just physical activities. If you sleep, it doesn't tell you what you did to get into these compensatory strategies. It tells you, how hard is your body working and where is your body working to recover. And then that information can be translated into a suggestion that this is how you have this is what you should expect from subsequent training. So it is how much are you going to have to pay for your body to continue to get better, or can you even get better in a consistent fashion? And that's to try to explain omega wave like that is I don't even know that I'm doing it complete justice.
Sure.
It's using electrical signals to give you an opinion on the cost of your already intelligent training. And we're basically trying to determine what is a good idea today, because we're assuming that you know what to do. This is the correct training parameters, acute variables for this person to get better at explosive jumping. Okay. But is today a good day for those training choices to can they always work? Yes, in theory, they can always work, but what are the costs? What are you going to have to pay? Is it going to be, for instance, if this omega wave isn't going to tell you have to take 3 days off. But if you use it long enough, you'll start to see that if you deliver a particular intensity of acute variables, volume, intensity, blah, 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 under these electrical signals that the body is trying to tell you that, hey, I don't want 100% intensity. I can do that much at a 50% intensity, and then you can come back the next day. And it's really a report card, a checklist for all the things that you can do. And now to answer your second question, I cannot answer you in a highly affirmative fashion because we were already pretty good. Like, in fact, in terms of controlling injuries. So I can't tell you that omega wave has helped us with injuries. It has helped us in performance. Where last summer published a poster over a 2-year period of time where we used omega wave measures to retrospectively. We were not using it to predict performance while we were testing it, but we were able to see that there's a linear correlation between key measures and whether we win or lose. So in theory, if we continue to manage those 3 measures, we should be able to predict wins and losses. Obviously, we're going to keep running that study retrospectively every year, and but we don't have a lot of injuries at the senior national level for a number of reasons. We feel very confident with our levels of recovery using other measures. We don't just use omega wave, and we go 11 or 12 deep. So the training load, our coaches using other variables, our coaches are very keen to managing training load. So all of those things are helping us control injury. So because I firmly believe in our program, if something was taken away from us, we could still do what we do. I don't know that we would do it as well, but that's omega wave measures the cost of what you're doing. It doesn't tell you if you're a good or bad person. It tells you what you're at, and people don't understand that. They and again, I don't care whose fault it is, but it's omega wave is going to, and of course there's a lot of holes in omega wave as well in terms of what people will say it's got noise in the system. Well, okay, well that's but again, if you use a lot of other techniques to get to the same endpoints, then I think it's just fine. So I have no problem with people saying what they say, because they're not wrong. They just want to, and then it's a black box, so they don't know how they get to those numbers, so they can't crack it themselves. But in the poster study that we published, you could crack it. You could dip your hand into Omega Wave, pull out the numbers, and calculate them yourself. Not every measure like that is you can do that in Omega Wave.
Yeah, that's very interesting, and yeah, like you reiterated a couple of times. It's giving you a kind of a daily checkup on where your body is currently, and then
that's not unfair.
Yeah, but one other question I had is, in working with the athletes, and say that based on the reading you get for that particular day on an athlete, you're going to make an adjustment. Have you ever had to have situations where, just in terms of the kind of the psychology for the athlete, explaining to them so they understand that in the long run, we're doing this to help you? Have you ever had to have conversations because you're getting pushback from the athlete in terms?
Yeah, and that's you just have that conversation with the athlete or the coach, and then you back off. Like the tenet of our program in terms of monitoring and management, we develop opinions based off beliefs. So you run the Omega Wave, for instance, and then I believe this, so then I show up to this table with an opinion. I have a position or an opinion, and then we make a statement that if so and so does this today, I think this is what's going to happen, and then you back off, and that's our role. And then when given more of an iron fist, then that statement becomes a decision. But the information that we generate and the angle that we come with in terms of communication is that we're just making a statement. Someone else is going to make the decision if it doesn't have to do with general physical preparedness, what we're doing in the weight room, what we're going to do in warm up, what we're going to do if we're given a period of time for conditioning or recovery. We're making all those decisions. But when it comes to managing training load, we're giving a statement based on an opinion on what we believe. And again, we're using those words in this highly systematic fashion so that anyone else can change what they are doing with different technology or different models that give them beliefs and opinions. And then you just make a statement. But indeed, like a lot of because we take that approach, and because we have the right people, I think a lot of times those problems arise because you just got the wrong people communicating. They don't really understand the technology, and that can be with anything. That can be with using movement testing, output testing, readiness testing, all these different things. If they don't really know exactly what it is, or they don't have the ideal communication skills, then it can turn into a shit show.
Right. Yeah, communication.
That's right.
Key.
It took me that long to curse, huh?
That's okay. That's all right. You can speak freely. Very cool. I would like to hear your thoughts on terms of when working with, say, a basketball, athletes in basketball, in terms of, let's just use the deadlift, for example. And say you have like a shorter athlete versus a taller athlete. Would you, what would be some recommendations in trying to set them up, with that lift to make sure they're getting in the ideal position for that athlete, taking into consideration longer levers and that type of
thing? There's absolutely zero reason to think a basketball player is any different than anybody else. First of all, there's tall athletes in other sports. There's tall humans on earth that don't play basketball. Does it look good? Does it, what are your measures in terms of what you think this lift should look like? And the fact that they're tall is completely irrelevant until it becomes relevant. Now, can you get more out of a lift that you pull out of the rack versus the floor? I don't know. In theory, you're going over longer distance. There's a lot more value to be had going off the floor. But if they physically cannot efficiently get into that position within the amount of time that you want to, because I think anyone can do it. I don't even have a lot of entertainment for that thought process. long arms, long legs. What does the lift look like? Do you value what it is? But to suggest that someone can't do it because they physically are tall, for instance, and again, a lot of the things that I talk about, like almost everything I've done or I have embodied physically at some point. I'm most people know, like I'm like a walking fire hydrant. Like I'm like 5 foot nothing. Um, and I can stand next to someone who's literally a foot taller, and my legs are longer than theirs. So, what does that tell you about the total height? Or, for instance, total height. If you take somebody, because we do a lot of profiling in terms of where the person has their height. If they have a lot of height in their head, it's completely useless height. It tells you nothing about their ability to hinge and get to a bar. It also tells you very little about their ability to reach their hand up and block a shot. And there's particular body types that can take advantage of that. So now I think it's always better to be tall, because again, that's more of an interest for what they can do on their court.
Sure.
But then if they have shorter levers in their spine, it's probably better if it's longer in their legs. But then if it's longer in their legs, I want a shorter femur and a longer lower leg. I want a shorter humerus and longer forearm. I always want long fingers and toes. So there's a whole schematic of all those different things. Now, how does that translate back to the deadlift? Can they get down to the floor with good form? No. Why? And then once you know why, is it worth the squeeze to get them there? Is it, if they have stiff ankles and that's the reason they can't get to the floor? Well, maybe they can go sumo. And again, well, maybe they have a lot of internal resistance because they're stiff, but they can actually get there. Are you okay with that cost of training? And again, are we deadlifting for strength and power? Are we deadlifting for other types of qualities in terms of creating flexibility and directional tissue lines that might be of interest for injury prevention and end range control? So look, again, it's not deadlift and it's not tall. It's like, what's the purpose of what you're doing? And is it worth the squeeze to fill in the gaps if they're not doing what it is that you want them to do?
No, that's excellent. That was great. I mean, that's exactly what I was looking for. That's
There's 7-footers that can pull stuff off the floor.
Right.
Now, is that person going to be an Olympic lifter? No, because then that's a different story. Because now it's not about it's not about like the amount of force and power you can create. It's how many wheels you can get on the bar. So there's probably a sweet spot. But again, that sweet spot is still, look, almost every great Olympic lifter has a short torso and really long legs and everything that I just described.
Mm-hmm.
So, and every sprinter is going to have that. The sports that do not value a short torso is rowing, swimming, potentially some rotary sports. So I mean, I've seen 7-footers, literal 7-footers, get down to the bar and yank it, looking like they're like 5'9". So that's because they have levers. Now, the same 7-footer might have to pull slightly below the knee, and that's because maybe it's not worth the squeeze to demand something that they're not set up to do at the efficiency that you decide as a coach. These blanket suggestions are really unfortunate.
No, that was you made the point I was hoping for, which was the importance of being able to get into the position and then identifying, is it worth the cost or the squeeze, as you said.
Yeah. But
Yeah.
I've heard people say, like, yeah, anybody over 6'3" is pulling out of the rack. Again, a rack pull is a really good thing to do. You can probably load that up more than what you can go off the floor, but you're missing some things in that position of the floor versus middle shin or wherever they're going off of. I'm not but again, I'm not going to have somebody go off the floor if they can't do it with good form, like what you just said. Can they even get into the right position?
Right. No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Thank you. Okay. Let's kind of last topic I have down before we talk about training mules rehab, because we're going to spend a good amount of time on that one. So, where do we need to go to continue to, and this will probably lead right into training equals rehab, but where do we need to go in the health and fitness industry to continue to improve and help people in terms of just the not necessarily like systems or models, but just overall in terms of, I guess, like the knowledge or what we need to apply on a day-to-day basis in terms of some principles and working with people. You know what I mean?
No, I don't. I could try to give you an answer. No, I don't really know what you mean. But so it maybe is the question. What do I think people should get better at in terms of executing
Yes.
training and rehab programs?
That's much more
Yeah.
concise and succinct than what I was
Evaluation, and I think the more keen and evaluating, not like generating pages and pages of Santa's list of information, but evaluating keenly for great decisions in the next step of training. That's what we can do better. Yeah, and using tests and screens and assessments that do not take you to a particular technique. They take you to a particular bucket of techniques. And clearly, if someone can't run fast, that sounds like a performance measure. So teaching them to run fast is one way to help them be better. Giving them the physiological qualities, giving them the neurological qualities of joint position, deciding what the best day is to deliver those things. You see, there's so many different things. Maybe getting up in their head a little bit and delivering a psychological intervention is how they'll run faster. But again, we all agree that we want somebody to run faster. So to me, that's a keen evaluation. And then all your other evaluations would have spoken to it. So it's a very, very circular, very, very almost dharmic process of evaluation that I just use the word keen. I try to use words. If I said dharmic all the time, people would think I'm nuts. But okay, a keen. No, we don't want a keen evaluation. We don't want that. No one would say that. So that's why I say the evaluation process should be very, very keen. And a lot of times that means taking you away from the things that you do really well. And because how can you, if you're a therapist, the best solution might be nutrition. And if you don't do anything to evaluate for nutrition, you don't even know that what this person needs. And you're just assuming that the skills that you do well, whether it gets funneled into a finite amount of techniques or only things that a quote unquote therapist would do, everyone has to work together and everyone should be using the same evaluation process. Then there's a secondary and a tertiary level of evaluation once we decide what bucket we're going to go into.
Awesome. Okay, so with that, let's segue into topic I'm really excited to discuss with you, which is some of your work, and it's continued to progress and grow, but kind of provide the audience with a bit of overview on how Training Equals Rehab got started, and then how we've kind of gone, because you have video products for each one, 2, and 3. So kind of explain some of that before we get into the finer details.
Well, I think a lot of the stuff that we've talked about on a call, maybe not as much to do with like long-term athletic development of junior athletes, but a lot of it's just almost like a brain dump. Like you want to crawl inside out into my head of how do I look at the human development process, including other things that maybe I don't do well. And a lot of it, all my different situations that I've worked in has contributed to where I've gotten today. And I've just taken bits and pieces and keep trying to put it to this magnetic core of a thought process. And it's about keen evaluation and people working together and finding these potential solutions that may not necessarily be who the gatekeeper is really the expert at delivering. It's based off of, like I said earlier, specific adaptation to imposed demands. It's based off of identifying a target and finding the correct and most efficient way to create that quality to adapt into where you want it to go. And whether that's a rehabilitation goal or a training goal, it's all the same. Everything's based off of all human systems change the same way. And Selye model of adaptation probably is the way it happens for anything. But when we think about Selye's model of adaptation, we tend to think of it in terms of fitness, where you have shock, resistance, supercompensation, exhaustion. Now, shock, it's easy to appreciate what shock is when you're lifting weights or running for a long period of time, because, oh my God, you're shocked. This is heavy and I'm sore. Or, oh my God, I'm running for a long period of time and I'm out of breath. That process just kind of becomes very, very truncated when I crack your neck and all of a sudden your neck can move better. That's not an adaptation, but it was probably maybe a neurological adjustment, and now the window is open for further changes and further changes. But again, like you delivered something that the body recognized so fast as shock, but it didn't need to become resistant to it because you were bringing it back to a minimum standard. And all of a sudden, the supercompensation of now the neck moves better. Now, is that really true? I'm just explaining how I think. Hopefully, no one is offended by applying a manual technique to their neck and it moves better. But you're not done. You've got to keep moving down the chain, because there was a reason why your neck didn't move better in the first place. And in my opinion, the reason the neck didn't move better in the first place was because it was not resilient to some group of stressors. I don't know what those stressors were, but you do, because you would have ran a really keen evaluation and find what are the most limiting factors, both local and systemic, as to why that neck didn't move the way it was supposed to move anymore. Hopefully, the cracking your neck works, because that means there was no frank structural changes. You can't make a change that fast if you're changing structure. What you can change is neurological strategies. And everything just all fits into the same bucket. How long different techniques take is different. What systems that they target is different. How they interact with each other is different. But if you take any one quality, it can change across the same series of thought processes that Selye's model of adaptation delivers. And that's where everyone can start to speak the same language and come together.
Awesome. Very cool. Very cool. So the first video you had came out several years ago at this point. So if folks are interested in your products and want to check them out, could you just provide a little bit of context in some things that may be different in 1 versus 2 and 2 versus 3, so on?
So across the board, it is a story. I had a decision to make. Do I repeat things and people will get mad that they're buying something that I repeated, or do I make it all very continuous so that people get mad and then they have to buy it? So it does go 1, 2, 3. Now the truth of the matter is that the information and the slides that I developed in 2009, I wouldn't go near today. Some of them, I used to say 85%. You say 8. I would say it's maybe as little as 70%. I mean, there's stuff that on the first DVD that I cringe. Not just my presentation style. Hopefully I've gotten a lot better at that as well. But there's just concepts that I simply was wrong, and how or maybe how I positioned the information, I was wrong. And I'm cool with that. Like, but that's where, anytime you read something or you watch something, even today, like, I mean, I still sell the first DVD and I still recommend it, but it's impossible for me to in good faith tell you that, yeah, that's everything that I do. In 2009, I was approached by Equinox, and one of my very good friends, Geraldine Coopersmith, wanted to put together, how do you basically the call was like, how do you put together a model of bringing physical therapy and personal training together? Not necessarily strength and conditioning, but personal training, which is a little different animal. Personal training is a lot more personal than training, and it doesn't make it bad. It's just different. A thought process on how you're going to approach these different things. But anyway, I said, I don't really believe that. I think this is interesting. Like, there is no gap. There's some people out there that are bridging the gap. That's the most dumbest thing. Like, there is no gap. It's one thing. If there's a gap, it's because you have bad people. There's no bridging the gap between training and therapy. It's just one thing. And that's where I began the focus on the first DVD was to have my philosophy in terms of how I looked at at that time, maybe a lot more neurological pieces to the puzzle, and segued into how can the personal trainer be a part of the solution for working with someone that really needs therapy. Because again, I try to create messages based off of problems. You can't have a solution without a problem. So the problem is that people don't refer out, and whatever the reasons are, good reasons, not so good reasons, they don't do it. They don't work with other people. You can't find the right person. You're afraid the therapist is going to steal your client. You're afraid the therapist is going to run you down. Well, a lot of times you deserve to be run down. But that doesn't mean the therapist should be doing it. But these are so how do we create solutions to get so this client can get what they need? Because if they get what they need, they're going to continue to be training, and the personal trainer makes more money, and the personal trainer is able to positively affect that person's life if they get what they need. It's just a division of labor. And what we did was we used the SFMA at the time. I called it the SFMA with restrictor plates, where it was just the top tier. And if the top tier was an FN, we talked about some of the fitness strategies that should, not necessarily will, should be competent to be coached. It doesn't mean that you're automatically going to be throwing big wheels around. It means if you're going to coach this particular set of exercises, the SFMA has told you that the joints can get into the right positions. So your failure won't be because you need a therapist. Or you need a foam roller and a stick and a lacrosse ball, which can only do so much. Then we talked about the patterns that were not painful, but they just didn't do the right thing. And then we continued to bucket them into what now is better to describe as mobility and motor control challenges. And we did a whole bunch of exercises, many of which I use today. And that systematic approach that I think is probably better explained today than it was then. But it's the exact same thought process on how therapists and trainers can work together, and that's what the first DVD was. The second DVD continued to talk about my philosophy. We actually start to get into some of what is now, I call that keen evaluation. But the focus on that second DVD was really looking at the how does DNS fit into this? Now, DNS is hands down the most powerful technique that I have learned, both from primarily through reflex locomotion, but also the exercises in terms of creating a neurological reset with active techniques. Reflex locomotion is not an active technique. But more importantly than that, it explains how everything works. And no matter what the technique, the principles of DNS helped me understand why that technique does what it does. And a lot of it has to simply do with specific adaptation to imposed demand, integrating information from outside of the body and then integrating information inside the body for a purposeful goal, and learning how baby does that, and then how we can reverse engineer that into seeing why different joint positions make us really, really strong and fast, why different joint positions make shoulders hurt and then some don't hurt, and then how does manual therapy, which is another input from outside of the body. Then we talked a lot about DNS and how it at that time had impacted a lot of some of the other things that I did. We talked about crawling, talked about throwing med ball a certain way, which is rolling, and all these different things that began to put things into play. So we continued to talk about a lot of the joint by joint on the second DVD, and then continue to talk about the core pendulum theory, which are still hallmarks to what I do. But then we added the neurodevelopmental perspective, and the second DVD delivered a lot of windows into explaining, in my opinion, why DNS works and why it is I have a tremendous debt to what I've learned from them. And then the third one kind of took a shift. It wasn't necessarily feeding into the same evaluation process. We talked a lot about the evaluation process. It was more like a brain. Here's where I'm at another 3.5 years later, and this is what I do. This is exactly how I do it. And then focused on fitness, where I keep talking about it, but I didn't necessarily have it on on a loop like on the DVD. So we talked a lot about some of the things where we got away from DNS, which is this baby can live within rehab and training to a degree. In my opinion, it does not have the principles govern everything, but the active exercises are more for motor strategies rather than frank fitness. The first one had very little to do with fitness. We just talked about the importance of it. Now we talked about, okay, here's why this fitness program works. This is how you can start to say, okay, do 10 seconds on, 50 seconds off for 20 to 60 minutes for sarcoplasmic hypertrophy and all the things that I actually do with different people. And even then, I felt that way about every DVD. We filmed that in November. It'll probably be out in May. I wish I could go back and say things differently. It's all just snapshots of what I'm thinking and how I use things that I've learned and my opinions and facts. I still will say when the facts get in the way of your opinion, then I sound like a bad guy. But everything that I say, you have opportunities to go back and check. And I'm very clear on this is what I do, and it's almost like not important to me if it meets your approval, and it shouldn't. And likewise. But I think if we keep stripping it back, we'll find that we probably really do agree on everything that really does matter. But even then, a lot of people don't, and that's okay. But that's so the third DVD is really a focus on fitness, and then where I'm at basically at the year of 2016.
Excellent. Yeah, that was beautiful. Very, very thorough overview of each one. And
now you got to go buy them.
I know, but I'm going to make sure I include each one in the show notes so everybody can find them and check them out and stuff. So that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So is there anything else that you want to weigh in on or chat about before we kind of?
No, it's these are things that I know you have a pulse on what the people that listen to your podcast is, Joe, and that if you think this is the stuff that they want to hear, man, I'm just a talking head right now, literally. So it's
well, one final question while I got you on here, and I'm probably going to just start asking each guest this before we move into the rapid fire. But do you have any from a sport perspective for rowing? Is there any recommendations that you have, that things that rowers should be addressing either from a movement or strength perspective?
So I don't train a lot of rowers. The first thing that comes to mind when I have seen rowers, it seems that they need to pick the right parents, because they're all like 6'5" and above, and they're all long torso. because rowing it appears to be so secular that there only is like high level rowing. Like no one's doing rowing like recreation, and the ones that do is just because they're not good enough to be elite, but they're still like really good. So you don't see people with short torsos getting into rowing because they'll suck. So I don't know. It's but again, the same thing, because and I had a conversation recently. These white collar sports like rowing, where because it's a white collar sport, and it happens on rivers near Ivy League schools and et cetera. They're not in the weight room, and again, to develop look, if you have two people that their mom is 6'8" and dad is 7 foot, and they all have like really long torsos, do you want the one who's like really, really strong and moves well, or do you want the one that's not as strong and doesn't move as well? I mean, there's no penalty to having these incredibly robust general physical qualities. And because of its culture, it appears that there's this all I need to do is row. Like, dude, like if you imagine how much better you could be if you in some kind of quality, even if it was just resiliency. So it's I don't know enough about rowing to say anything more than that.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean that's probably one of the most fundamental things that I try to get out there is the importance of making sure that they're moving well, and that there's a lot of things that I believe and feel that you can learn in a training setting, in a training room, versus on the erg on the water because
Here's something very interesting. So I had a kid from Colombia, so obviously he's legit. And so there's a type of rower where like there's guys on both sides of the boat.
so
So,
sculling or sweep.
all right. Anyway, the so as I said, well, you got to help me help you. So basically, like if you're on the right side of the boat, you basically pull off to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So when he got on the concept two, he would go into valgus every single time, and I'm like, this doesn't even look right. Like, there's no way. I mean, this is what you do. Maybe this is why your problem. He's like, show me, like, if make believe you were sitting on the right side of the boat, because based on his levers, he couldn't get his arms to go through his legs, unless they were, in valgus. And he basically, in my opinion, if you're in valgus, you're potentially giving up a lot of, or put it this way, you have increased the potential cost to each repetition of rowing. And then when he pulled off to the side, all of a sudden he didn't go into valgus because he didn't need to make room for his arms to slide through. And it was just a very, very interesting thought as to like how you can get to Ivy League, and which is probably very high level Division I rowing, and have that as an issue. Now I could be slapped in the face and say, well, no, that's actually okay in rowing, and here's why. I'm like, okay, well, I didn't know that. But it was a very interesting, some of the things, that was just a sidebar to rowing. But look, this kid was like 6'5". I don't even know if he was 200 pounds. And he was really good rower. Like, I'm like, dude, if you just learned how to do these basic, lifts, I think it could be really special. But which would have also fit into the rehabilitation of his ankle injury.
Excellent. That was great insight. So with that,
so tell me, so what is it? When you pull off to the side, what is it called?
Sweep rowing.
Sweeping.
So it's
sweep rowing.
Two hands
Yeah.
on one oar, and you're going to be rotating, compressing through the seat and rotating out to one side. And sculling, you have an oar in each hand, and so they're coming up like this and compressing out like that.
Well, yeah, it was an interesting learning experience for me.
Very cool. All right, so this is one of my favorite parts of every interview. We're going to move into the rapid fire. So I ask each guest these questions, and these are not anything to do with the topics. This is just simply for the audience to get to know you a little bit better, and these are fun. So, Charlie, given all your experience and your current base of knowledge, if you could go back in time, what advice would you give yourself 15 years ago?
I've gotten into this one. And it's like what we talked about in the NBA, accept mediocrity. If I accepted mediocrity, I probably would have had a lot less failures in my life. But I wouldn't be me. I'm not even sure you'd want to be talking to me right now. But if I could have lowered my standards, I wish somebody, because people did tell me that. I can remember, like, Charlie, can't you just turn it off for one day? And I found that I couldn't, and that's probably why I've had failures, hallmark failures in my life, and I grow and learn from it. But if I don't want those failures, I probably should have lowered my standards. And it's a really interesting thing to think of and to talk about, because some of these really cool jobs that I've had and I've moved on from is because I can't. No, I don't even think people close to the situation would be like, no, Charlie, it's not that you're wrong. It's just that they didn't want what you had. And that's not so much to kiss my ass. It's probably the truth. And it's an interesting thing. I know for a fact I would not have had the failures in my life if I had lower standards to what I needed to go to sleep at night.
Very interesting. But I can tell you seem very happy.
Doing all right.
Yeah,
I'm doing all right.
Yeah,
I'm doing all right.
You don't regret it for sure.
I don't think. Here's something, and of course I'll run the risk of challenging my humility. If you're cut from the same cloth that I'm cut from, sometimes it's a lot easier to see the dark cloud rather than the silver lining. And as long as you don't let that spiral, which again, I'm not embarrassed to say has happened to me throughout my life, it's easy to see these things when you constantly want to win and you constantly want to dominate. People don't. They're very happy with what they have, and I am very happy where I'm at right now. But there's always more. There's always more. It's never an end to trying to accomplish things.
But I love the competitive attitude and always wanting to improve and get better. That's awesome.
I don't know how to. Yeah, and that's if people don't fail, then I don't even know how they could even identify with what I'm saying.
Right.
Because that would mean they were a god. Yeah, that would mean if they never. So if you're holding 40 years at a certain place, you're either a god or you have really low standards.
Right.
So,
what's your favorite strength training exercise if you had to pick one?
Kettlebell swing.
Nice.
Come on, man! What a dumb question.
How has your training changed today compared to 15 years ago?
Much more focused and keen towards fitness, like being able to duplicate a particular quality over and over and over again.
Excellent. Have you ever had an injury, and if so, how did that injury change or affect your training?
Dude, I was a pretty legit competitive powerlifter. Of course, you have injury.
I knew that. I mean, I knew you were a powerlifter, but I didn't know. I asked this question to everybody. So
yeah. If you had injury, has anybody ever answered no? They don't. They never had an injury. I mean, my hip hurts right now. It's yeah, I do think sometimes when you have a particular injury, you're able to communicate in terms of helping somebody that appears to have a similar injury.
Sure.
I don't really remember or think of anything that like I do differently, because of certain injuries. But I can say that, oh my God, I wish if I knew what I knew now, like if I knew then, and maybe these other, like how different or maybe what I would have been able to accomplish in powerlifting. So yeah, I don't know if I do things differently, but I've definitely found that you understand when a certain rehabilitation approach has worked for you, you can probably champion or quarterback that process for someone else a little bit better because you do know the mistakes before they happen.
Yeah, that's great. That's great perspective, and like you said too, it's easy for being able to communicate and relate to the people that you're working with.
Yeah, that too. Yeah, I was thinking more from a level of direction, but certainly from a psychological level as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. Very good. What's one thing that junior athletes should be doing more of to complement their training and their health?
Less of their sport.
All right, excellent. What's your best tip to improve recovery after a training session?
Sleep.
Love it. Okay, what's your favorite meal?
Healthy or non-healthy?
No, favorite meal. Like if you had to pick, like, all right, this is the last meal I'm going to have. It could be like.
Oh no, that is I have that one in the can. Okay, so like I went Incredible Hulk and murdered a bunch of people. So I'm on this is my last meal before I get that needle. All right, so it's eel sushi, is macaroni and cheese, tuna casserole, chicken parm, and then my drinks are chocolate milk, Mountain Dew, and a vanilla milkshake.
That's awesome.
Yeah, be careful what you wish for.
That's great. Okay, what's one book everyone should read? It can be any genre or interest.
How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
I got that one. Excellent
book. Yeah.
Okay, who have you studied or do you continue to study in your career to improve and get better?
I can't say one person. I mean, that's.
You don't have to pick one. You could list them off if you want.
I mean, I mean, but as far as in terms of the type of professional that I am, I owe so much to Mike Boyle, Gray Cook, Lee Burton. in terms of not only the exposures to the foundations of how I think, but then actually being big brothers to me as we go along. And I don't even want to say anybody else because I'll start forgetting people. I go back to, it's something that I think people don't do enough of, is just say thank you. And I can't say thank you enough. Like, first of all, I don't really see the cost in saying thank you to people, or admitting that, hey, and again, there's a little bit of a spiritual message, but I don't think any of us can do anything without something or someone else allowing it to happen. And those guys allowed, this to happen in terms of whatever you were trying to say before, of being well known or whatever. So, yeah. I just like, I have a big TV. I can watch wrestling on Monday night.
Awesome. Well, hey man, this has been so much fun. Thank you again so much for taking the time to come on. I know how busy you are, and I really appreciate you sharing some of your experiences and wisdom with my audience and stuff. And I'm looking forward to putting this one out.
Cool. All right, man.
Yeah. Hey, just hang on the line. Let me give you a goodbye off air.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed this brand new episode of the Leo Training Podcast. If you value this content, please take a moment of your time, head on over to iTunes and drop in a 5-star review. Or, even better, share it on your favorite social media networks such as Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. And be sure to tune in next week when I have another brand new episode and I interview Dr. Fiona Wilson, and we discuss low back injuries and pain related to the sport of rowing.
Thanks for listening to the Leo Training Podcast. Subscribe and get even more expert training tips at www.leotraining.io.